So good evening, everybody. And today, for our Society of Sports Therapists webinar, we are joined by one of our SST Extra partners, Sports Injury Fix. So we have founder and CEO Malcolm Sloan and one of his fellow directors, Mike James, who some of you might know him better as the Endurance Physio. So what the guys are going to talk you through is a little bit about the Sports Injury Fix platform and how we can help therapists solve potential issues that we are having at the moment and that we've always had. So I'll leave it over to you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. And lovely to be on here. Some of you will know of us and some of you won't. So actually, in terms of to get the most out of this webinar, what we find typically is the best is actually to talk about some of the challenges that are facing therapists in the industry now, and to talk through some of the solutions that are there. So we'll try and make this webinar as helpful as possible for current challenges that you're facing now. We believe that comments are able to be put on this on YouTube, so please do comment along the way with particular questions, bugbears, whatever that may be, and we'll certainly address those and work through them. In terms of who Sports Injury Fix are, we are a platform for therapists. We started life as a freebie listing site that then a raft of industry association chairman asked us to build out our booking software and turn that into software that really empowers therapists. So we have now become far more of a technology enabler for therapists in tackling the problems that you face, to tackle no-shows, to make sure you've got consent, whether it's class bookings, to online booking, payments, automations, whatever it may be. All around that is providing those simple, affordable solutions that really empower you as a business. We've been fortunate enough to be very successful with it so far and take on more and more clients, a number of SST members as well, and it's been great to work with you. One thing that really stands us out is, rather than just being a software company, is we are a company that's founded with knowledge of the therapy business. We've got Mike as a director, and he'll give a bit of background about himself when I'm finished up. And it's all about understanding the therapy world, solving the problems that therapists face. Some of those are through software. Some of that is as part of the community, doing regular free sessions as part of that membership to help tackle those clinical and business challenges that you might be facing at the present time. So Gareth is someone that we've known now we've got to know each other about a year now, I think, isn't it, Gareth?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Which has been great. And a raft of other members as well. So one of the things that we will say right up front is, if anybody is facing challenges at the moment and wants a free chat, then we always offer free consultations. So spend half an hour talking through what the current problems and challenges are. We're great believers in honesty, and we'll always seek to identify 2 or 3 options for you to allow you to choose what the best option is for your business. And that's not always SIF, and that's fine. But anyway, I'll let Mike introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. So my name is Mike James. I'm a therapist. I'm the therapist director of the team. My background is many, many years ago, when the century started in 19. I became a therapist, initially joining the Royal Air Force and spending the best part of 2 decades traveling the world, working primarily in physical training, but then in exercise rehab and rehab, mainly living at a place called Headley Court, which used to be our defence centre of rehab. Along the way, while I was I picked up some qualifications in sports rehab and sports science and strength conditioning, including a degree in sports rehab. And then about 7 years ago now, I left. I decided that I wanted to try something new, and we were just about to start a family, so it was time to step away from the military life. And that's when, after a really short period of working in the NHS, I did a physio masters, and then gave myself the title of the endurance physio, predominantly because of my background as an endurance athlete. But I specialize now and then as a therapist who works exclusively with endurance athletes. I moved back home to Wales a few years ago and was growing my business from there. What I have always loved about being a therapist is being able to influence and help people on a one-to-one basis or a small group basis. And certainly my legacy as a therapist will be what I can do for the people in front of me. But I always had a bit of an itch. I always had a bit of a yearning to help the industry on a wider scale. But I didn't know how to do that. I had no idea how to do that. And as serendipity sometimes comes and visits us, many emails used to drop into my inbox, and most of them got deleted. And then 2.5, 3 years ago, this strange man called Malcolm Sloan sent me an email about this new company called Sports Injury Fix, and whether I wanted to be listed on the site and write some blogs and stuff. And I thought, yeah, this sounds good. And I jumped on, and that's how I started. I started as a member on the site, and we collaborated and we chatted, and Malcolm decided to put a conference on, and I went along and spoke at the conference, worked at the National Running Show, and very quickly realized that we had very similar plans, very similar visions for the industry. And we just sort of bonded. And I guess out of the blue, although in hindsight, it probably was maturing nicely over about a 12-month period, Malcolm kindly invited me to become a director. So I've been full-time now with Sports Injury Fix. Wow, for longer than I think 2 years now, which has flown by. It's an avenue that I never thought my career might be able to take me or would end up. Some of the meetings that we have, some of the conversations and the things we work on is very non-traditional for a therapist. I continue to be a therapist. I still run the endurance physio that's helping clients locally, nationally, but also teaching therapists. And it's the symbiosis, I guess, of how I use my therapist background and my therapy background, as well as my role within Sports Injury Fix, that allows me to help us understand the industry, but help the industry understand us a little bit more as well. So my full-time job, 9 to 5, is now as a director of Sports Injury Fix. I guess you could say it's the clinical lead, although we don't have a clinical arm as such as far as treating. It's just whenever there's therapy or industry related things on a clinical nature, then I tend to step in and lead that one. I've certainly taken that side along the lines of how we can offer you with some CPD and some sort of MDT working and some collaborative support network, which we'll come on to later. Some of the, I guess, surprise benefits to being a member of Sports Injury Fix that you may not realize when you think of us as a software platform. And it's also something that stands us out so differently from the other platforms. So I'm a physio, I'm a sports rehabilitator, I'm a sports scientist, I'm a strength coach. They've helped me form who I am today. And this is us and this is me.
Yeah. So, Gareth, I know we spoke on the phone about what you after us to cover. Are there any particular topics you want us to start off with?
I think the most pertinent ones would be the ones sort of surrounding the current times and the COVID-19 and what that means for us as therapists, with our phrases that we've never maybe utilized so often, such as standard operating procedures, risk assessments, COVID questionnaires, consent. So if you could talk a little bit about the problems that you've faced in the community with that, and then also some of the potential solutions.
Yeah, we certainly can. And as we talk through all of this, what we always tend to do, and the more you get to know us, the more you'll find it's a recurring theme. We know that money is very tight for therapists normally anyway, or people don't like spending money, and that's fine. So it's working out, well, what are the free options that are there? Because invariably there will always be a free option. What's a nice efficient way, and what's the full bells and whistles if money's no object, which some people really want as well. So I guess in terms of that, the key challenges which most people have been facing is that thing of, right, well, I'm going to reopen. What is the advice and guidance that's out there? What's the advice and guidance from my association? How do I cross-reference it? What is my insurer after as well? And it's normally a marrying up of those three. So it's been interesting. We've certainly had a few members reach out and in our forums ask the questions around it. The one thing that we've found is it tends to be, it's almost matching up people with those unique triangular case studies for them to understand, well, what are those requirements of each of those key people? Once they've actually understood what the forms are, and that's one of the things that we really find ourselves at the moment, is most people, they understand about the PPE and they've sorted out that. They understand about what forms they need and they've sorted out that. So then it's that next stage of, right, okay, well, I understand if I have to get a client in, how I'd walk them through and how I wipe everything down and disinfect it. But it's then taking it down to that next level of that customer journey, which is, right, well, I've got these forms. How do I get them to fill it in? Because I don't really want them coming into the clinic and sitting down and spending 10, 15 minutes in the clinic filling out these forms in paper and with pen. And actually some of this information I need beforehand. So we've certainly seen a huge increase in people approaching us with that very situation of going, how do I do this? I'm a technophobe and I have no idea how to do it, through to others that have gone, well, okay, I've always meant to go online and automate everything and go electronic. Now is the time that I have to, because I have to try and make things as paperless as possible. So that's a situation then where, again, if you want the free option of how to do it, so the free option that you can do it is just if you've got templates that have been handed to you from associations or whatever, then actually you can utilize those and save them and just email those out to patients every time. They then can print them off, fill those in, take a picture, scan them back in and email back to you, and then you can save them somewhere. So that's a free way of doing it. Obviously, that is not particularly scalable and it takes a bit of time from your side, and it's a bit of time and frustration from a patient side as well, but it is an option that is free as well. The other option is then utilizing software with the templates that are there. Now, in SIF, for example, then actually you can completely personalize any template you want. So you are not restricted to certain templates. We know with different software that's out there, some of them just go, here are your templates and that is it. So therefore that is a bit challenging using that. It may be that you need to reconsider things. Others don't allow you to attach anything or do any templates. Others are similar to SIF and actually will allow you to do some personalization that's there. So actually then you can set it up. So anytime a booking takes place and you can tailor it by service, then the relevant form is sent out to the patient. And again, one of the things to ask and check with it, if you're utilizing software, is then, okay, does that patient then fill that out and that's automatically saved in the patient record? Or is that saved in a random place elsewhere? Is that sent back as a PDF? How does that work? But there are options to set that up. And certainly with SIF, we've tried to set it up as simply as possible. So effectively you can go, right, what are the forms for an initial consultation? What are the forms that somebody needs to complete beforehand? Right, let's have them all teed up. So when that booking happens, those forms automatically go out. When a patient completes that, that's automatically saved in a searchable format in the patient records. Everything's there nice and simple. So then prior to them coming into the appointment, you already know who they are. You already know a bit about their condition and why they're coming. You've any pre-screening notes, etc. And again, as part of that, and again, all good software will have this as well. It allows you to take electronic consent. And one of the key things at the moment is that informed consent. So whereas in the past, a tick box would suffice, nowadays somebody has to have read it and actually physically typed their name or done some form of electronic signature that's there. But these are simple solutions that, again, if you've got a software provider or if you haven't, then find one that you can actually talk to, that can actually walk you through those steps and help you set it up. Because hopefully I've explained it in a nice, clear, simple way. If it sounds complex, actually to set that up is a very simple process. Once you've got that set up, then for every booking that happens, no longer are you having to stand and wait while someone fills in a form for 10 minutes. You are already pre-prepared for every time somebody comes to an appointment, because you already know those details and you can do any prep you need to do. You don't have to manually send out any forms. You don't have to manually save anything. Everything should be saved securely in the cloud with hot backups, GDPR compliant, UK data centers, so you can feel comfortable and confident in the security aspect, as well as it saving you time. And then in the current situation with COVID, it's all nice and secure as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point with the automated stuff in advance, because at the moment it's all about mitigating risk and reducing the risk of transmission. So if you can reduce, like you said, the time, so if it's 10 minutes to fill out a form, then for me, that's adding into your risk assessment of reducing risk. And then the other thing, such as contact points, for instance. So I'm sure you'll talk about this in a moment with like payment, for instance. You don't really want to be touching cash. You don't really want to be using a card machine that you'll have to wipe down after each transaction, etc. So those automated processes, I think, are really helpful for therapists.
Yeah, they really are. Because it's just something that just saves you time as well. And that's something I'll get Mike to touch on it a bit as well, because he's done virtual appointments for a long time. So actually is very familiar with trying to automate stuff as much as possible, and the impact and thinking through what that means from a customer perspective as well. But actually it is just about, right, with all of this, it provides an opportunity to simplify process. And actually a lot of the processes that were there before were done because that's how we'd always done them. And now it provides a nice opportunity to keep things nice and simple. And what it also does is it has that secondary benefit of actually it saves you a lot of time. It saves you a lot of stress. It makes things easy. Again, like with payment, one of the big challenges, particularly of newly qualified therapists, often is no-shows. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for it. Some businesses really suffer with them. Some businesses are okay. Sometimes it's down to location, sometimes it's personality, whatever it may be. But generally speaking, it's a bit of a bugbear in the industry. Whereas actually, if you take payment up front anyway, well then, and you are using automated notifications, those no-show rates drop to virtually nothing. So actually, there's that secondary benefit of changing some of these practices and processes can really help. Now, one of the concerns that therapists sometimes face is, well, I feel uncomfortable asking for payment up front. So there's a couple of things there. One is, well, pretty much what else can you book on the internet to do in a few days' time that you don't pay up front for? And pretty much the only thing is maybe a restaurant, but even that will change. There's been a big hoo-ha recently of restaurants struggling, people going back in, and no-shows being a problem. So more and more of them are charging either upfront payments, or the other option then is a deposit. So that's something that actually SIF, I think, to my knowledge, I'd love to be corrected here if I'm wrong, is the only software around where you can set it up so you take a deposit from people. And at least then you've got some of the payment that's in, you've got that commitment, you've got the reassurance that they'll show up. Equally, that can be useful if you're someone that perhaps is wedded or is in a contract for a particular card machine provider, you have to put certain amounts through, then all of the card machine providers have increased the limit to £45 that you can put through the transactions. So it may be that you do a bit through a deposit, which actually, if people are committed to see you, who's going to mind paying a small deposit? The majority of people won't. And then it may be you do the rest through the card transaction again. And like you say, contactless, we all know people tap the card, so it's not ideal, but at least then that's an option for you. And likewise, actually, members of Sports Injury Fix, we looked around, and SumUp are a provider that people may be familiar with. They already had, I think, what was the best rate on the market for that point of sale device. We've got a partnership with them now, so actually our members get an even lower price for those transactions as well, which is just one of those secondary benefits for SIF. But I'll hand over to Mike now, and he can talk you through around his experience and some of that patient interaction and how they think and react to all of this.
Yeah, thanks. So I think Mark's done a brilliant job at explaining some of the things we do and have offered. I think it's a good time to take a 10,000 foot view of how we've navigated predominantly the last 16 weeks, but a little bit before. So as a company, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is that we're proactive and agile in the way we approach things. So we love to have feedback. We love to converse with members and non-members to see how we can improve things for them. And we've been very aware for a long time now, and I'm a classic example of this, that therapists are trained to treat. We're not very good at running businesses, and most of us don't enjoy trying to run a business out of it. Most of us would be better off running charities than businesses. Now, there are exceptions, obviously, who are very good at it, very astute at it and thrive on it, but most of us don't. So even well before COVID, we'd started to understand the industry, the landscape of the industry, and where we could pitch ourselves and the help that we could provide people at making them better at managing their businesses, pretty much focally to allow them to focus more on treating people, because that's what we want to do. Now, coronavirus gave us a fantastic opportunity to really double down on this. So our sort of history, our chronology almost through COVID has been the same blueprint, but we've switched a little bit of what we tried to do. And Mark mentioned that at the start, we were all forced to close down. It had a massive effect on all of us. We had a bit of an identity crisis as individuals, as professions, and as an industry. And then we had that whole debate of switching to telehealth or virtual appointments, however you want to call them. So straight off the bat, one of our first moves was to address some of the issues regarding that, provide information and provide open access help for people to be able to capitalize on telehealth. We provided loads of YouTube videos and webinars similar to this about making the switch to that. But we also made a conscious effort to speak to those therapists who weren't interested in doing it. What can you focus your business on, your learning on, and things like that to navigate through that? Now we've transitioned through that, and we're now thankfully doing the same process to those who are ready to reopen or have reopened. But ultimately, what we've tried to do is always think about the safety and the confidence of the therapist and their patients. So when it was telehealth, when it was virtual appointments, we were really big at trying to help people understand and then portray to their clients how these things were beneficial and safe and could give them confidence in using that platform. And the same applies now. So all of these electronic solutions that we're talking about, the overarching thing with them is to give you more confidence that you're doing everything you possibly can to minimize that risk and to provide the best service for your patients and clients. But for the clients to also realize that these things are now in place to allow me to do it. Where we've been quite fortunate is there are many therapists that we've worked with over the last couple of years who knew the things they needed to do or wanted to do to improve their business and streamline their processes. But when we're in that race and we're going down that river, it's very hard to jump out of the river and then stop and pause and make these changes. And what we've all been forced to do, if we try to put a positive slant on it, is we've been given an opportunity to make the change. So we've just facilitated people making that change. So whether it's saving them time and money in the long run or the short run, because we'll all adapt our business processes going forward, we had a lot of success at helping people with telehealth, and a lot of people made a successful transition to that. Some still feel confident that they want to continue that way. Some are mixing a bit of both, and some have gone, brilliant, that helped me for now, but now it's time to move on. Whichever form we're talking about, whether it's an in-person or a virtual appointment, then it's making the patient journey and the patient experience as positive and as smooth as possible. So we all know, regardless of what professional background we come from, we know the things that are the issues. It's getting the information beforehand. Malcolm did a really great job of just explaining that process of how we can save time, minimize contact, and all of those things. But making sure that we're giving those messages to the public as well. Because we've encountered many, many therapists who have done an absolutely brilliant job at putting the processes into place. It's been easier for some than others. We've handheld some through it, and we've just signposted some through it. But where we as an industry sometimes fall down is communicating that message to our patients. So we've done a lot of work at trying to help people understand that. What's your priorities? Who are you trying to contact first? Is your avatar or your marketing campaign now slightly different? We've been big fans that, first and foremost, the people you should be getting in touch with and communicating with right through your process are your existing clients. They're the ones who know, like, and trust you. They value you. And they're probably the ones who will be wanting to come back in and see you before anyone else. So even if you change your whole business strategy, you've had a whole makeover, you've changed your business name, you've painted your clinic, you've done whatever you wanted to do to improve your systems, make sure you communicate with your clients before you even think of starting to find new ones. But likewise, and this is something we've spent a lot of time this week doing, we spent a lot of time with therapists chatting where there was initially for some a bit of a reluctance and a poor uptake from the patients to transition to virtual. And we spent many hours saying to people, look, you can't make them come. You can provide the best processes possible, put all the relevant paperwork and systems in place. If they don't want to come, you can't make them come. And actually now we're having those same conversations as the doors swing open again. If people aren't ready to come in, then you can't make them come in, but you now have a system in place that allows them to either wait or to continue with non-face-to-face contact until they're ready to come back in. So we've had this mantra for a long time, but particularly in lockdown, our overarching work is to be proactive, but also reactive in a positive way if the feedback demands it, and help therapists understand both clinically and from a business point of view how you can be efficient, effective, and dynamic in the way you work. It's just been a transition over the last 4 months from being locked down to work in some way virtually to now reopening. And that's the way we continue to try and work that way. But patients, we know with patients, there's a spectrum. There are some who are absolutely crying to come back in and see people, and there's some who don't want to touch us with a barge pole yet. You just have to respect that. If you're having barriers, if you're finding that you're not getting the reception that you wanted, the biggest thing to check is, have you given your message across clearly enough and put those systems and practices in place to be as effective as you can?
Yeah, some really, really good points there, Mike. One thing that was fascinating with the virtual appointments, and it's something that we've seen a lot because this is such a strange time that people aren't used to. Therapists have spent a lot of time going, right, what do I need? What does my business need? How do I sort it out? And the language, when you listen to it and you see it in the forums, is all about it's about it's about me, it's about my business. Very rarely do you ever get the question asked, what is people's experience of the best video conferencing facility for patients? No one ever asks it in that way. But actually, what's been fascinating is a lot of people rushed out. We certainly saw a lot of software providers rushed out video conferencing software and then said, right, you have to use it. And we've made it the most secure thing possible. And every single appointment has its own separate code and separate password. And you have to download this and download that. And what was fascinating is actually those that then try to engage with the public went, well, no one's taking it up. We've got this fantastic software that's secure. But the public are there going, I've never heard of them. I've seen stuff left, right, and center about security, and they've never been mentioned. So what scrutiny are they under? What changes are they doing? And actually, well, I've spent my time, chatting to my son on Skype in Australia, or we've been doing group Zoom calls. So actually the ones that I'm familiar with are WhatsApp and Zoom and, Messenger and Skype. Well, actually, for those therapists that understood that and went, right, well, let's understand which ones are secure. Let's use a medium that you are familiar with. Then they had a far greater uptake of people that were willing to do virtual appointments. And it wasn't they didn't want to see them. It's just the way it was communicated didn't take into account the patient. And just changing that message really slightly led to some really big impacts and changes. And it's something that we're seeing a bit at the moment. It was fascinating. Mike was involved in a big discussion in one of the other groups. Actually, there's a COVID-19 therapist Facebook group that's well worth joining. It's a free group to join, run by the amazing Gemma Oliver, and it's super helpful. And there was a big debate around in some of the physios reopening and some of their experiences. And it was great asking them, okay, well, how have you found it? And how have you involved the patient in that journey? And they all went, well, we've emailed out and we've told them what we're doing, and we've had a really good uptake. It's like, okay, well, that's not involving the patient in the journey. That's telling the patient what you're doing. And then when asked, well, how many patients are coming back? It was about 20%. Okay, so 20% have felt comfortable, but what about that 80%? And so it's really, it's challenging some of our own biases and thinking around it. And there's a couple of things that people may or may not be familiar with, but it's really worth having a look and a read. So one is always looking up Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and the TED Talk is probably the main thing to see from him. And that talks about when we describe ourselves, particularly in the therapy world, we're very good at describing the what, but actually start with the why. And if we talk about why, then how, then what, then actually we start using language that really resonates with people. It's then really thinking, okay, well, how have I made patients feel comfortable? What are those options and solutions? In the same way as, we've come on here tonight, and it would have been easy for us to take the invite, which we were given, to just spend an hour talking at people about what sports injury fix is. And I think 99% of people would have switched off after probably about 10 minutes. Because it's not talking in language in terms of, well, what are the problems and how are you helping me solve those problems? And what we find is when you talk in that language, then that resonates, and then you start helping people. And if you help people, not all of them will become customers, but that's all right, because you're doing good by them. They will then leave with a good impression of you. They will talk to other people. And we all know that word of mouth marketing, particularly in the therapy world and looking for treatment, is the most powerful thing that's out there. So, let's take that time to challenge ourselves and to do that. And again, if anybody wants a second pair of eyes over a particular bit of wording, I might regret asking this if I get bombarded, but it is something that we do and we're happy to do. Then get in contact.
Be careful what you wish for.
Sorry, Gareth.
Just be careful what you wish for, like you say.
Yeah. Depends on, I can't see how many people are watching this. So I don't know whether it's a couple of people and their dog or whether it's a couple of thousand. But still, I think it's really good to engage in debate. And we, by all means, don't have all the answers. But what we like to do is to help people and help address those basics, because there are some basic things now that can really, really help and pay dividends. We know for a lot of people, they also go, well, I don't even know where to start. How do I start talking about myself now? How do I make patients feel reassured? And often you'll see them then spend time in therapist groups asking people, how do you make patients feel reassured? And then actually when you engage in that and ask them and say, okay, well, what steps are you doing? And it is, I'm talking to other therapists. When actually it's that thing of, well, we talked about the patient-centered approach. Who are your best patients? The patients that you really feel like you can help. They do what you say, you love treating them, and they love you. They're the ones to have that conversation with. And some of those will have come back and seen you, and some of them won't. But virtually all of them will be happy to have a conversation to explain the rationale and reasoning. And then you go, right, okay, well, I understand my target, my perfect customer market, and this is the feedback that they are saying. You make a note of some of the language which they use because that's what resonates, and then you try that out, and then suddenly you start to understand, well, what's the language that works with them? Where is it they hang out? Where is it, what do they read? How do I access them? How is it they first heard of me? And you start to understand then your plan of attack and your plan of approach. And that might be that, one thing Mike certainly had some success with is runners. Okay, Mike during lockdown has done numerous Facebook Lives to running groups that suddenly couldn't run but still wanted to meet up. They couldn't meet up with if they had certain therapists as members of their group or whatever else, and suddenly it provided an opportunity to spend an hour of his time engaging with them. But actually that was the free bit. But then he had a raft of appointment requests afterwards, and people went, well, that was really helpful. You really understand what we're doing. It's all about that know, like, and trust. I now know who you are. I like what you're saying. I now trust you. You've given your time to give back. That's a really powerful thing. And then that's paid dividends.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, as a SIF member myself, one of the things that I find really, really important as a very much a unique selling point is that community side of it. So like you said, you have your own community group sort of thing where therapists will discuss certain things. And I think that's a great thing to have. I've had another clinical software, which is just a software, and it did its job and was fine. But then, like you say, with that community and everything, and you're very accessible as well for if you've got any questions, or to be honest, if you've got any feedback. At the moment I see constant updates to the site, and that comes from sort of members. So I think that's really important from a therapist point of view, from a selfish point of view. If there's things that you want integrated into a clinic management system, that you guys will take that on board, and if it's possible, you'll look to implement that, which I think is a really strong message for therapists. And I'll be completely honest, that webinar I listened to where Gemma was talking about the patient journey, and I thought, yeah, do you know what, you're right. I've sent emails out saying this is what I'm going to do, this is what the government guidelines are, and then off the back of that, I thought I'm going to ask them. So I sent out a survey through MailChimp, to what are you expecting when you come back? What would you like to see? And it was interesting, some of the things that people would say, and the comments that they would have, it was really interesting. And I never really thought, like you mentioned, we don't as therapists sometimes think of that. And I think it's interesting when you speak to guys like yourself, and I've got a couple of other friends in business, and when they talk to me about how I see business, they make me really question it. And I think as therapists, we're probably the worst business people out there, most of us. And I've learned so much from speaking to guys like yourself and other business people about how can you take that and apply it in a therapeutic sort of manner, which is really interesting.
Yeah, you say that actually, and this is one of my little bugbears actually. So many therapists say we're some of the worst in business, and actually Mike and I sometimes fall out slightly with it as well. And he's obviously said, oh, it'd be great running a charity, for example. So we didn't really talk about my background, but my background is from that business side. And actually that's one of the things that when we set up SIF, we deliberately wanted to have. I've got a long business background in management consultancy and strategy and risk and civil service and private practice. And then Mike on the therapist side. And then we've got a kind of unsung hero, James Edgeworth, who's just an uber geek and a phenomenal techie. And then a team beneath us as well. That's great. But that allows us to challenge each other. But actually, when you look at it from a business side, businesses at the moment are paying silly amounts of money to management consultancy firms to get them to understand the customer, to get them to be caring. Whereas before it was all about, right, well, we're business and we're just going to do what we want and we'll just make some money regardless. They're all trying to become these caring businesses that come across as genuinely caring about their customers. Now, if you think about the therapy profession, that's the one thing that 99.9% of you have just got nailed. That's where you start from. And the rapport that you have with the majority of those patients and customers and clients is amazing, and how you treat them. So actually, from a business perspective, you're starting from up there. So actually, in terms of, Pareto's law, you've got 80% of it covered. And actually, when you start chatting to them, it's simple little tweaks, so you just said in your own example there, well, actually, I'd done stuff and that worked, but I sent out a survey and that just helped it a bit better. Yeah. And it's just that final 20% that it's just a little bit of help, and no one's ever going to know it. As Mike said before, you're trained to treat, not run a business. Yeah. So actually, people sometimes then feel as if, okay, well, actually, yeah, I'm not very good at that business side, but business, so much of it is about that rapport. You've got all that covered. So actually, then it's just going, okay, well, how do we just help you achieve that 20%? We know most therapists want to go and learn about the latest CPD. We know they want to enhance their clinical skills. That's what you enjoy. So actually, and that's been one of the driving forces with SIF, is how do we create solutions that allow you to focus on that and focus on being the best clinician you can be, so you don't have to worry about some of the other rubbish that feels like rubbish to you and feels annoying and just kind of wastes your time, so to speak. But actually, it's just things that can just be automated and made simple and make your life simple. But actually, that has a really big impact on the business side as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to jump in as well when it was brilliant, the compliment you gave us about the collective side of what we do. And it's probably, if I'm honest, the proudest thing I have as far as our achievements to date. My background is military. Military is all about multidisciplinary team working, both in a non-clinical and in a clinical way. So I've always strived to include different backgrounds and different professions. And as Malcolm, when he described the setup of SIF, that's what we are. We're an MDT, basically. Now, I love within our collection, within our couple of hundred therapists now in our Facebook group, then being able to tap into different knowledge bases and backgrounds. The SST will know the power of the collective force, but you're all sports therapists. And sometimes getting a different opinion on things is often the extra little push you need sometimes. Now, what's been really interesting and revealing to me is one thing's happened in our collective that has been exactly what I anticipated to. If someone posts a clinical question, then you get a diverse cross-section of answers from people's different perspectives, from their different professional backgrounds. But I never anticipated this happening. It's been fantastic. If someone posts a business question or a non-clinical question, then the same result happens. You get this collection of multidisciplinary, diverse thinkers offering their advice. We've had people post an example of some of their paperwork that they were going to push out, and everyone else in the nicest possible way has picked it apart and added to it and shown some really constructive criticism with it. We've had people post, personal issues. We've had all sorts of stuff from it. So the power of that collective and the power of that multidisciplinary background is something that we probably don't speak enough about publicly. Privately, we're always talking about it, but having different ideas and, Malcolm's played his background down. He always does. He's very humble with it all. But, I have worked in this industry for 20 years. I've treated literally thousands of people, and I've learned more of him in the last 18 months about the industry in a different way from what I knew it than I could have ever learned in that time before, because he just sees it from a different angle. He sees it from a different point of view. And by us trying to unite all these professions, bring in different heads and different thinkers together. And I guess that one luxury we have at SIF now is because none of us spend our day in front of patients full time every day. We have that little ability to step back and strategize and think bigger picture thinking sometimes. So don't underestimate a collection and the power of collection, particularly when you can put in some diverse minds. And what a lot of people haven't thought about, Malcolm mentioned it, not many people through the whole of this process and before have included the patient. Yet the irony is we've spent so many times in CPD and online and conferences listening and talking about patient-centered approach, patient involvement, the patient voice, but we only think of it from a clinical point of view. We never think of it about a business point of view. We had dozens of therapists who were ringing valued, trusted customers and saying, I know you're not due to see me for treatment, but I'm a bit nervous about doing a Skype or a Zoom call. Would you mind letting me do a free trial one with you? And you give me feedback to how I've done. We've had loads of real sort of unique examples and experiences that have been great learning points for us and the therapists as we've gone through this whole crazy time we've been living in.
Fantastic. So if we're going to finish up, guys, I was just wondering if you had one bit of advice each, you'd offer members that are looking now, whether they've just started back up in their practice or they're getting all their sort of documents in place to do that. What's your one bit of advice that you would offer them?
I would say the one word to bear in mind with everything is communication. And that would be that communication is everything. Most therapists are feeling nervous about what guidance is needed to allow them to open still. So it's that communicating with those trusted bodies that provide that guidance. If you don't feel you understand what's come out from the SST or from your insurer or whatever that may be, then communicate with them to help you understand and help you feel comfortable. Likewise, we've talked in depth about patients and the communication side. Therapy and small business owners can be quite a lonely place, and it doesn't have to be, so use those support networks that are yet there. Use the SST, use the members of SST, reach out and talk to them. And likewise, and it's a genuine offer, that anybody that wants to have a conversation with us at SIF can have half an hour of our time for free, just to talk through what is your situation, what are those things that are on your mind, what are those solutions that you may be looking for. And some of them, it may just be stick with what you've got, that works for you, and actually it's just a reassurance perspective. And probably about 10% of the time when we have these conversations, that's what we say to people. Actually, it's just about understanding a bit more about your current situation, giving a bit of reassurance. So don't feel you have to do everything on your own. Communicate with relevant people. And again, we are more than happy for that to be for us to be one of those people that you communicate with. I don't know if we've got the option of putting in a link, etc. If anyone's listening this far, I think via the member benefit area of SST, then there's an option to get hold of us, or email info@sportsinjuryfix.com. Reach out to us. We're at Sports Injury Fix on all social media as well. So whatever channel you prefer, just reach out, reference this webinar. I'm Malcolm, and that's Mike. So we're more than happy to do that.
Just to butt in there, so members, if you log into the SST website, and if you look under the SST Extra section in there, you'll see Sports Injury Fix and a link to the website. But also, just to make you aware, you're able to get 20% off Sports Injury Fix if you look to sign up as well as an SST Extra member. Malcolm's too modest maybe to mention that, but if you look on there, there's a host of other things on that SST Extra page if you haven't visited it to check out to help you guys at this time. Mike,
and I think that works out. There's from £6.60 a month or something nuts in terms of, so yeah, it's not a lot of money per month.
No, definitely. I mean, that from a personal side, I used to pay, like you say, about £26 a month, I think it was. So like you say, in comparative terms there, it's a big saving, and you're offering the same service. Sorry to butt in. What's your top bit of advice then, Mike?
So I should have butted in and gone first, because I wrote communicate on there and he stole it. So
you lose, Mike.
Right. So quick knee-jerk thinking, but mine would be, honestly, do things when you're ready to do them and don't be pressured by people. We're seeing a lot of people now, because guidance is coming out and because others are reopening, we're seeing lots of people feeling obligated and pressured to do things before they're ready. We know that people have different pressures financially and responsibilities of why some may want to open sooner or later compared to others. But take your time, put the things in place that you need, and only when you feel confident that all of those things and yourself feel safe and confident to reopen, then reopen. And then finally, the thing I'd signpost people to is all the work that we've done over the last few months was to help people, whether they were SIF members or not. On our website, we have a blog section, and there's probably a dozen blogs that have been written over the last 4 months that specifically talk in depth about the things we've chatted about, whether that's telehealth, reopening, or just the bigger picture of lockdown, from CPD to learning and all sorts of stuff. So you've been generous giving us an hour of your time to watch us today. If you wanted to give us a little bit more, visit the blog section. And there's also a couple of videos on our YouTube channel. But the main place, I would say, if you want to find out more about what we chatted about without getting in touch with us, check out the blog section.
Brilliant stuff. I think that's a perfect note to leave that on. Thank you both for joining me for an hour. I know it's late in the evening. I know you both got young families, so thank you very much for that.
That's all right. Thank you. It's been lovely to get to know everyone.
Brilliant. And thank you to everybody listening. We'll speak to you all soon. Thank you. Bye.